So if Jake Paul answered KSI's challenge and fought him instead of having his brother fight him, this isn't the Jake Paul that beat Ben Askren, Nate Robinson, and Gibb. No, this is the Jake Paul that fought Deji in 2018, and pretty much, I guess, he ducked KSI. So who would win if this boxing fight were to happen? I think if I asked this back in 2018, most of the people would be in favor of KSI, since Jake Paul, he was kind of in Logan Paul's shadow. Logan was the one that actually stepped up and fought KSI. Now with the first KSI and Logan fight, I actually have made a video on it from a couple days ago. It's called How Good Was KSI in 2018, if you want to check it out. I pretty much went through the whole fight and how at the start, KSI had to play it slow to observe Logan's technique, and he realized that, Logan Paul was a counter puncher, and he started to use feints to counter Logan, and he would go straight for the body or the head. In the video, if you want to watch it, I've said that Logan Paul, I felt like he looked much better than KSI. He had the advantage, he had the reach, and he would lean forward to kind of draw KSI in, and then he would counter to KSI, which KSI resorted to using feint just to get a hit. The problem with KSI, and pretty much the main problem, was that KSI, whenever he would try and get in a good hit, he would rely on momentum and swing and throw a haymaker and just throw a bunch at Logan, hoping to land one. But in this fight, if he fought Jake Paul instead of Logan, would he have the advantage and would he win? Now, something I hear a lot about Jake Paul is that people say that Jake Paul barely lost to Deji, or Deji, he pretty much beat Jake Paul and it was only his cardio. I disagree actually. Throughout the whole fight, I felt like Jake Paul, he won every round. It was a closer fight, I will admit that. It was a closer fight between him and Deji. Both of them were kind of new to boxing. I guess Jake Paul was on tour before the whole fight, and Deji did a lot of damage to Jake. For Jake Paul, I think that Jake Paul did win every round in the fight, so I'll show you why. So I'll start with something Jake Paul could have done better. I felt like Jake Paul should have done a better job of guarding his face, as Deji was able to make him bleed. I don't think he broke his nose necessarily, but he did definitely make him bleed a lot. So in this fight, Jake was definitely more observant of Deji. He was able to get in some good hooks, some good shots, some good jabs. But the main reason why I feel like people didn't give Jake Paul as much credit back then as they do now is because Jake Paul actually did take a lot of damage from Deji in his fight in the first round, but he did a good job of anticipating when Deji would throw. From here, he feints, Deji actually flinches, Deji tries to hit him, he catches him with his guard down. So here Jake Paul uses his reach to his advantage and actually jabs before Deji does, and Jake Paul throughout the whole fight was able to utilize his advantages. But the main problem with his defense was that he was not guarding his face enough. But Jake Paul did show that he actually did train his skills a lot for the fight. He used his advantages well and was able to catch Deji off balance, and he was able to utilize the check hook to keep Deji away even before he was gassed. But if KSI fought Jake Paul, would the same thing happen? In the KSI Logan fight, the problem was that KSI did not have the advantage as he planned with the Joe fight, and at the start he was not used to what Logan was able to do because there wasn't really much footage. I don't think there was that much footage of Logan back in 2018. I'm not sure though. I don't think so though. There's only one video of him boxing in Canada, and that's just it. Now against an opponent like Joe, I feel like KSI did throw a lot, but I think KSI would land less against Jake. Jake is a counter puncher, and yeah, I think a lot of people will disagree with me when I say this, but I think that Logan Paul was a better boxer than Jake Paul was in 2018, and I say this because I don't think Jake Paul had the same mentality as he does now before he beat Deji. Who showed better feints? I think Jake Paul did, but Jake Paul wasn't the one that fought a harder opponent. It's actually arguable that Logan Paul was a much harder opponent than Jake Paul back in 2018. I don't think many people would disagree, especially since Logan is also much bigger than Jake. I feel like KSI, just the way he fights is more like he relies more on pretty much aggressiveness and cardio, whereas Jake Paul relies on anticipating his opponent. So it's a really tough matchup actually. It's not as much as you think. And honestly, I think that this is a winnable fight for KSI. Not that I'm being like a fanboy or anything. I feel like since Logan Paul, he did have to adapt with Logan Paul, I feel like with Jake Paul, he would have less of a disadvantage. Although with KSI's kind of pace, I feel like Jake Paul would get some good shots in. It's an interesting fight. Like right now, I don't know who to say. I'm going to say KSI right now because he did fight a harder opponent, and with Jake Paul, he just, a lot of people say Jake Paul will beat KSI today. I say that too. I think he would destroy KSI if they fought today. But if we are talking strictly 2018, I see KSI winning this because he probably would have a stronger mentality than Jake Paul did. Jake Paul, at the start, he was scared to fight KSI. KSI had much more experience than him. I think he started training back in 2017, and he just had a lot more training, and I feel like the training would just kick in KSI's fight with Jake. I feel like I'd see KSI winning this, but it would be a close fight for sure. I do say close because I feel like Jake could utilize a check hook to stop KSI from, being too aggressive. But right now, I feel like KSI would win just due to his killer instinct. I feel like KSI would overwhelm Jake. I think in this fight, KSI would use a lot more feints, and he would be able to tag Jake Paul with maybe some body shots or maybe even a face shot. Jake Paul, clearly he doesn't have a strong face. I feel like KSI could probably hit harder than Deji would, and he would give Jake a much harder time than Deji would, and especially because KSI actually came prepared to his fight, and if he fought Jake, I feel like Jake would have much more pressure than he did against Deji. He would be overwhelmed. He could also do a slip-in counter in many of Jake Paul's shots. I feel like he would go for the body though. And I feel like KSI just has a really high chance of winning this. And unlike his Logan fight, I feel like KSI, with a similar opponent, he would do much better. And people have to remember that Jake Paul, back then his right hand wasn't as strong as it is now. And if this fight happens, I would see KSI win this way more times than what he would. And honestly, I just think KSI, I think he would win this. Right now, I made a video, I think he would get destroyed if he fought Jake Paul. But this is 2018, this is something people have to remember, okay? Because I get comments every time, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments disagreeing with me. But hey, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Who do you think would win? Especially since Jake Paul, he is kind of a similar opponent to KSI. Do you think that Jake Paul can win this? Or do you think that KSI will win this? Especially since KSI fought a bigger opponent than him, and he did struggle a bit. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing week. Or weekend, I guess, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care and peace.